Now, low ESR capacitors. When analog VTX was all that was available, they were absolutely essential. Without them, your video in your goggles looked like a bad 1960s TV with rolling lines, banding, noise everywhere. Stick on a capacitor and suddenly you had a clean picture. But here's the question, what about digital VTX? DJI, Walksnail HDZero, do we still need them? Or can we finally ditch these big electrolytics and save some space in our builds? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to the Whirly Bloke channel. First, a quick refresher. ESCs and motors generate electrical noise and voltage ripple whenever the motors are running. And that ripple travels through your wiring system, and without anything to soak it up, it can cause problems to the point of noisy video and being generally unflyable. In analog video, that showed up directly as banding and flicker. In digital video, it's very different. You won't see any lines. Instead, your VTX or your flight controller can brown out, freeze, or even reboot. And that's why we use capacitors. They act like sort of shock absorbers on your power system. Now, ESR stands for equivalent series resistance, and all capacitors have some internal resistance. The lower that resistance, the faster and more effectively the capacitor can absorb and release energy. A low ESR capacitor can soak up voltage spikes and ripple much better than a regular electrolytic, and that's why we use them in FPV. They protect sensitive electronics like flight controllers and VTXs. DJI and Walksnail HDZero air units and so on already include capacitors inside. They're mostly small ceramic capacitors right near the sensitive chips. And these are fantastic for cleaning up high frequency noise, but they can't deal with big, low frequency ripple spikes that a 5-inch quad can throw at them during punch outs and hard maneuvers. So while the VTX isn't helpless, those little onboard caps aren't a replacement for a good chunky low ESR electrolytic on your main battery pads. Now, I've been at this FPV game for over 10 years, and these are some of my original quads. And back in the early days of FPV, things looked very different. I know, more old men's stories about how all this used to be fields. But back then, there were no 4-in-1 ESCs. Instead, we strapped individual ESCs to each arm with heat shrink and zip ties. And the hobby was still figuring itself out, and people tried all kinds of weird and wacky ideas. Soft mounting motors to cut down vibrations, thankfully a fad that disappeared very quickly. Experimenting with different capacitor sizes and placements. Endless debates about whether to soft mount flight controllers to fix the gyro noise. And of course the big question, where should you mount your capacitors? Some would solder them directly onto the XT30 or the XT60 connector, which looked really tidy, but it was basically a complete and utter waste of time. A capacitor works best when it's as close as possible to the source of noise, which in our case is the ESCs and the motors. And that's why today you'll see the capacitor soldered right to the power pads of the ESC, not dangling off the battery lead. It's there to catch the noise before it can spread through the rest of your wiring. Our modern 4-in-1 ESCs made this much simpler. Now the noise sources are all in one place, and a single low ESR cap is usually enough to keep things under control. So does this mean we always need one when we're using digital VTX? Well, not exactly. For sub 5-inch builds, whoops, toothpicks, cine whoops, you can usually get away without an external capacitor. Current draw is lower, ESCs are all-in-one boards with some built-in filtering, and saving the extra bulk is often worth leaving the capacitor off. If your quad is tiny and the space is at a premium, leaving the cap out is a pretty fair trade-off. But once you step into 5-inch and larger builds, it's a very different story. Bigger motors, higher currents and longer flight times mean much more voltage ripple, and that ripple can kill ESC FETs, cause your flight controller to reset, or make your DJI air unit suddenly drop video mid-punch out, even though it has its own internal voltage regulators. So for 5-inch freestyle, racing or long-range builds, always fit at least one low ESR electrolytic capacitor. Think of it as cheap insurance for your entire power system. Now, I've experienced this in a few ways. Flying a 5-inch without a capacitor, the quad still flies, but you'll sometimes see glitches or even brownouts when you hammer the throttle. Adding a 1000 microfarad 35 volt low ESR cap, suddenly it's all rock solid. No random cutouts, no mid-air reboots. That stability is the real benefit. On digital, it's not about making the picture cleaner, it's about keeping it alive when everything is completely maxed out. So here are my recommendations based on 10 years of flying and crashing quads. For 3 to 4-inch builds, usually it's fine without one, but you can add a 470 microfarad 25 volt capacitor if you want extra protection. On 5-inch 4S, 1000 microfarads 25 volts low ESR capacitor is a good safe bet. And if you're flying 5-inch on 6S, definitely go for 1000 microfarad 35 volts, or even a second one if you're pushing big motors or going for one of those high speed builds. If you're flying long range, 7-inch or above, maybe multiple capacitors across the ESC and the VTX pads are definitely recommended. And brands like Panasonic FMFR or Rubicon ZLH or ZLG are solid choices, and they're far cheaper than replacing a fried air unit. So to wrap it all up, analog FPV, capacitors clean up your video, and they're absolutely essential on all sizes of drone. For digital FPV, capacitors keep your system stable and reliable. If it's sub 5-inch, you can usually get away without it. In fact, I often leave it off when I'm doing a very tight or small build. 5 inches and up, don't risk it. Always use a low ESR capacitor. It's cheap insurance and it could save you a very, very expensive day. If this video helped, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, have you flown digital VTX without a capacitor? And did it cause you any problems? Or do you want more videos like this with maybe a deeper technical content? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.